standing still. She was late. There was no point in nudging the accelerator any further. The old Fiat seemed to be running out of breath as it dawdled up the hill, shining its headlights through twisted branches onto pools of bluebells. Nighttime walk of wonderment, wearing of stout shoes and bearing of torches cancelled. The quaint note on the supermarket's board had been handwritten and signed by somebody calling himself Benedict. Lindsay needed some wonderment in her life. The last time she'd had a surprise was in January, when Bob had unstacked the dishwasher. She supposed her husband wouldn't want to join her on the walk, and she was right. "Count me out," Bob said. "The only surprise will be badgers, and I've had enough of them messing up my lawn." He wasn't getting off the sofa at 10 o'clock at night to see badgers, especially not when there was serious snooker on the television. Lindsay drove along the spine of the hill until she saw a small line of cars parked just off the road. She pulled in and joined the semicircle of onlookers facing a man dressed in a grey hooded cloak. He held out his hand towards Lindsay. "I am Benedict," he announced. "Welcome to our walk." "I'm Lindsay. Remember, I phoned you last night." "Speak not of telephones, Mistress Lindsay." There were sniggers from some of the group, doused by a stern look from Benedict, whose hand hadn't moved. He seemed to be waiting for something. "Oh, sorry," said Lindsay, and she felt in her jacket pocket, pulled out her crumpled fiver and handed it over. "Thank you." Benedict moved back to face the group. "Look before you. Yes, wonders of the modern world, but as nothing compared with the ancient." Lindsay looked out towards the Cheshire Plain. Threads and clusters of orange beads lounged on black velvet, and the reflected light smudged their way into a starlit sky. Benedict's voice had slid into a chant of carboniferous rocks, fossils and trilobites, followed by Triassic Mercia mudstones and sandstones that were blown onto the desert plain below over 200 million years ago. "Now, I want all of you to close your eyes. The temperature is plummeting, nothing is growing, and you are locked into ice." Lindsay did as Benedict asked. She had come here to be amazed. She'd had enough of the click of coloured balls on green bays, enough of Bob's grunts, groans and raucous cheers. She was hungry for words and for the spectacle that words could create. "Stand fast, for if you try to move, you will slip on the glacier beneath your feet." Lindsay gasped. A fierce chill seeped through the fleece of her jacket, like a wolf's bared teeth about to claim a spring lamb. Silence, cold. Benedict had finished speaking. Lindsay opened her eyes and gazed down. What had she expected? That the lights on the Cheshire Plain would have gone out? That she'd be the only person left on top of a frosted peak? Everything was just the same. Benedict's audience stood around him, waiting expectantly. "Follow me now to more recent marvels." Like obedient disciples, the group set off down the road behind their leader. They came to a sandy track whose edges were sprung with heather and bilberries. "Light your torches now," ordered Benedict. "Mine's got a switch. Is that all right?" asked a voice. Benedict ignored the question. He strode ahead, and Lindsay had difficulty keeping up. She shone her beam onto his yellow socks, which peeped from beneath the cloak. As the track dipped slightly, Benedict turned to face his audience with a sense of triumph. "Gather round me. Take heed as you look at the precipice to your left. Down there was the moss pit, where a certain Captain Watson died on his way up to the edge. Now, close your eyes." "Oh, here we go again," murmured somebody behind Lindsay. On a dark night in the February of 1644, Captain Watson becomes separated from the rest of the parliamentarian army as they march upwards from the town to Nick of the Hill, where they will fire Roaring Meg over the valley. The cannon's might will destroy Biddle House, the garrison, sheltering Lord Brereton and those loyal to the king. Benedict paused and swirled his cloak as if to enfold his audience into the moment. Hark! Captain Watson draws nigh. Listen to the twigs snapping and his boots squelching as he tries in vain to rejoin his dragoons. He can hear the shouts of his fellow soldiers, but he has lost his way. There is no moon and he cannot see the moss pit. He pushes onwards until his feet start to sink beneath him. Arms flailing, he seeks dry ground, but he's slipping deeper into the slime. Hear his screams as he pleads for help. But on the hill, Colonel Ashenhurst's army are preparing to lay siege to Biddle House, and the noise of war obliterates Captain Watson's cries. Lindsay stood still with her eyes shut. She was hearing a voice, but it wasn't a man's. Somewhere a woman was singing. Plaintive phrases dipped and soared as Lindsay tried to catch the words. My captain lost, but I shall wait for him. Had there been a tryst? Had Captain Watson been neglecting his duty, lost his way and stumbled into the moss pit? The song finished. Lindsay opened her eyes, bent forwards and aimed her torch down the steep slope. If this was some trick that Benedict had engineered for them, she would catch sight of the singer. But her torch flickered, faltered and went out. Her batteries must have gone. Lindsay turned to ask somebody else to shine a light, but there was nobody there. She supposed the group had moved on while she'd been listening to the song. Darkness, calm. The theatre concocted by Benedict had vanished. Then it started. Thuds, neighing, jangles, shouts and clashes burst out from somewhere down the track. A sliver of fear brushed Lindsay, but without her torch, she couldn't run back. Besides, this was it. She wasn't going to miss the show. Nighttime wonderment. Through the silver birch, flames of gold started to dance like dervishes snatching at the blackness. Lindsay slammed her hands over her ears as a sudden flash set off a thunderous blast that rocked the edge. Something tore into the sky, churning and crashing its way across the valley on the eastern side of the hill. A second and third explosion followed. Then a false lull settled, whilst horses whinnied and men barked commands. Lindsay uncovered her ears, but the discharge began again. The sky fizzed with ruptured light and the strange flying balls. A volley of blasts raged until it seemed that the boulders, the sand, the gritstone, and every living thing, including Lindsay, might be pounded to dust. She was coughing now. The air was thick with a blue smoke that reeked of burnt charcoal, sulphur, and saltpetre. This was no ordinary firework display with pretty showers of sparkling lights and choreographed bangs. This was an attack. Lindsay had no idea how Benedict had managed it. Surely speakers, lights and lasers were beyond his budget. And where were the rest of the group? The firing stopped, an outburst of cheering rose and then faded. Lindsay waited. Nothing. She turned and shuffled back up the track, feeling for the worn sand and the soft stones with the soles of her boots. At last her feet crunched on gravel. At that moment, Lindsay's torch began to shine brightly again, and beyond the road, Cheshire's electricity glittered. At the car park, people were chatting and getting into their cars. Lindsay detected not even a ripple of excitement or astonishment, and nobody seemed to have noticed that she'd been missing. Benedict was bundling his cloak into the back of his van. The yellow socks were still visible beneath his blue jeans. "Stunning! How did you do all that?" asked Lindsay. Oh, what? Benedict hesitated. Anyway, glad you enjoyed my act. 2 years at drama school weren't for nothing then. Here, hope you'll be up for my next one. Take one of these. Benedict handed Lindsay a flyer. "Brandish a bludgeon with the chartists at the Silk Mills. Meet Rude Hill." "Give us one too, Gary, will you?" somebody asked. Gary? It seemed Benedict had been stowed away into the van along with the cloak. As she drove home, Lindsay hugged the images of the night within her head. She didn't think she would tell anybody, for who would understand? And certainly not Bob, who would be asleep, dreaming of potting the black. She crept into the warmth of the bed. Bob turned over, opened his eyes, and stared at her. "It wasn't badgers," she whispered. "It was something else altogether." Bob heaved himself onto one elbow, sniffed Lindsay's hair, and frowned. "You stink of bad eggs. Where on earth have you been?"